There is the Treasurer. So good evening, Treasurer. Can you hear us?
I can, Andrew. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Well, look, thank you very much for making your time available tonight, Treasurer. And good evening to everyone online. This is an event which we pulled together at short notice with the Mosman and Manly Chambers of Commerce, with Charlotte and Tamara. And what we have tonight, Treasurer, is a slew of their members of the chambers who are in small business and have been affected by the shutdowns. And as you know, this is the third shutdown for many of these businesses within 12 months. So we also have on the line my good friend James Griffin, who's a member for Manly in the State Parliament. So if any state issues arise tonight, Treasurer, we do have James on the line. So I guess we were just hoping to hear a brief overview from you and then go to questions. And the format, ladies and gentlemen, is we have Tamara and Charlotte from the Mosman and Manly Chambers, respectively, ready to ask your questions. So thank you, Treasurer.
Well, thanks very much, Andrew. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Tamara. Thanks, James. Thanks, everybody else who's on the call today. Firstly, as a Victorian, I can very much identify and empathise with what you're going through right now. Victoria has been in lockdown for more than 200 days over the course of the last 15 to 18 months. My kids were out of school for half a year. Well, my 6-year-old daughter was. And the impact obviously was very, very significant in lots of respects, economically, and then in terms of people's well-being. So I very much understand that this is a pretty difficult time for people across New South Wales. And all I can tell you is that our government, the government that Andrew plays a very significant and senior role in, will stick by the community every step of the way, as we have from day one. In terms of substantive responses, obviously what we're doing on the economic side is providing income support through Services Australia to people in New South Wales, where they're in hotspot areas, which is the bulk of the state. They're receiving it from the federal government. In those other areas, it's being paid for by the state government. But the $750 to $450 payments, depending on hours of work lost, is at the level where JobKeeper, or the 750 is at the level where JobKeeper was last year when it was so significant. Payments are being made from application to money in bank accounts, sometimes as quick as 40 minutes. And more than 90% of the applications have been online. And more than $1 billion has already gone out to the people of New South Wales from the federal government through that program alone. So that's very significant. On the business side, again, we've pulled out all stops and we've reached a 50-50 cost-sharing arrangement with the New South Wales government. Prime Minister, the Premier, myself and Dom Perrottet had a number of meetings to reach that agreement. If you're a business with a turnover between $75,000 and $250 million, you will receive a payment between $1,500 and $100,000 a week if your turnover is down by 30% or more. And it's based on effectively an approximation of around 40% of the size of payroll. And the idea is for businesses to get access to working capital to meet their fixed costs. It might be rent, it might be water, energy, maintenance costs, as well as obviously they've got to make an obligation to keep their headcount as it was as well. Those payments are starting to flow, and between the two, income and business support, federally alone, we're putting $750 million a week into New South Wales, and the New South Wales government is putting in a similar amount, if not more, with some of their other programs. So it's a very substantial contribution. And the idea is to help cushion the blow, to help you get to the other side of this crisis. Obviously, we're doing everything we can on the health front as well. We've deployed Defence Force personnel to work with your police force to participate in all the necessary acts that are required to ensure that there's not only compliance, but you got the testing and the tracing and all the other parts of the vaccine rollout and the health response as well. And the good news is more and more people are getting vaccinated each and every day. I sense that there's the hesitancy around AstraZeneca is coming back somewhat, with the ATAGI advice now aligning between the facts on the ground and the health advice. That's a really positive step forward, with them strongly encouraging people to consider AstraZeneca and the benefits that come with that vaccine, rather than waiting for alternatives. And then obviously more and more Pfizer vaccines are coming on each and every day. We're now vaccinating more than 1 million people a week, and that's only going to go up in the period ahead. We released, the Prime Minister and I, and the Health Minister released the Doherty report today, but also a Treasury paper. Treasury worked alongside Doherty and did some analysis based on their various scenarios that they modelled, and looked at the impact on economic activity of vaccination rates at 50%, 60%, 70%, and 80%. The clear message is that where there are outbreaks, you've got to get on top of them quickly. That does involve lockdowns, but obviously the success that we have in suppressing the virus can also produce a strong rebound, as we've seen on the other side. And so that information is now out there, and that's what we're shooting for, the 70%, and then ultimately the 80% vaccination rates. The final thing I want to say is, now is a time not only for the community to bond together, but also for people to be, despite what may feel and is a very difficult situation, to feel confidence and optimism and hope for the future. Australia, and you may not feel it right now, but Australia has done so much better than the rest of the world on both the health and the economic front in COVID. On the health front, yes, we've lost lives, but to date, it's less than 1,000. In the UK, they've lost 130,000 lives, and the average loss of life across the OECD is more than 30,000. And so we have avoided the fate of many other nations in that respect. And on the economic front, our economy is still bigger today, and there are more people in work today than there were going into the pandemic, and no other economy has seen, no other advanced economy has seen that bounce back. So particularly for all of you in the business community, with right now, it's very, very difficult, particularly for smaller size businesses that may not have the same level of balance sheet support and flexibility around their workforces, or a national based business. Please have confidence and hope that your federal and state governments are working together to do as much as possible to get you to the other side of this. And based on what I've seen in Victoria, when you come out of lockdown, the rebound is strong. The rebound is very strong. And I've seen plenty of small businesses. In fact, I spoke about one today in the party room that Andrew dialed in virtually to, that I visited. It was a cafe and a homeware business where the person who established it had mortgaged their home, set it up, and opened their business 2 months before they went into COVID. They had 8 staff. They thought not only would they lose their business, and they thought they may even lose their house. Now they have more workers employed in that business than they did going into this crisis. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and our government, Morrison government and the Berejiklian governments will do everything possible to get you guys to the other side. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Treasurer, and thank you again for making your time available for the people of the Northern Beaches and North Shore. So we might start with Tamara.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Senator, and thank you very much, Treasurer. We have a lot of questions, so if you do run out of time today, I understand any unanswered questions are going to be followed up later on. So firstly, the major concern of our local businesses is around rent relief. It's definitely the most urgent issue facing the majority of businesses. In many cases, landlords are not taking up the incentives that have been offered to pass on rent relief to their tenants. Accommodation businesses in particular have been hard hit with the lockdowns and have higher rental costs, which can be up to 40% of revenue. So my question is, why is the government not setting clear guidelines with a compulsory code of conduct, as was the case last year, to ensure that all businesses are covered for some degree of rent relief? Why set it up so that any businesses can fall through the cracks and have to go through the angst and time involved in seeking mediation?
Well, I'll say some words and then throw it to your state member, because when we went through the first phase of this crisis, it's the state governments that took the action, both in terms of retail or commercial tenancies, as well as residential. They're not within the remit of the federal government, and codes of conduct were agreed and then implemented at a state level. And I know in Victoria, they are restarting their commercial residency, their commercial tenancy initiative to provide support to commercial tenants in that state. And I understand that in New South Wales, work was being done as well to provide rental relief. Some of the money that we provide through the business support is designed to help businesses with some of those fixed expenses, like rent, if they can't get deferrals. And then the other aspect, two other aspects I probably should have mentioned at the start, which are relevant to businesses. One is that we have spoken to the tax office, and if businesses are encountering problems in meeting their obligations on repayments or other tax-related matters, they should speak to the tax office and try to work through them individually. The tax office was flexible last year. It's obviously done on a case-by-case basis, but there is definitely an alertness and a willingness to work through hardship cases. The second thing is I've reached out to the banks through the ABA and received their agreements to provide relief on repayments for small and medium-sized businesses, and they've put out statements to that effect. And if businesses on this call feel like they're not getting a good hearing from the banks, they should contact Andrew. Sorry about that, Andrew.
That's okay.
Andrew chairs committees and has got a line of sight and back with the banks, and it's in the bank's interest. What we found, by the way, last year and again this year, is they want to keep their customers and their customers want to stay alive. And so there's a mutual interest here in trying to work through the problems rather than compound them. But on the issue of relief, I'll leave that to your state member to respond.
Yes, thanks, Treasurer. Look, I appreciate your time short here, so I'll be brief. The issue of commercial tenancies is one that's been brought up quite regularly since this last set of support has been rolled out, and it was something that was brought to the fore again today at the Chamber of Commerce Q&A that Manly Chamber put on. We are hearing loud and clear some of the concerns around it, and I'll be feeding that back into the Treasurer and Treasury team to look at what. There are a number of incentives being provided to commercial landlords, but having them take that up and pass on those incentives to tenants is an issue that is proving a stumbling block that we are looking at.
I might just add before we go back to Tamara, I mean, as the Treasurer said, if people have any particular issues with banks or with the tax office, they should definitely get in touch with me, and I'm very happy to help you.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Tamara and I have agreed we're going to take turns so that we make sure we're all covered. Thank you, Treasurer. Thanks, Senator. One of the main queries we've had today and over the last few months actually is being Manly is Northern Beaches has been through this already. So we went through it last year coming up to Christmas, and there have been plans put in place, or we believe there were plans and recommendations put in place to support a mechanism to help revenue get to people who are struggling immediately. So I really want to know what is the plan long term? What is the long-term plan for federal government? What are you putting in place to help our businesses, not only over the next month, but over the next 3 to 6, 12 months? Because somewhere like Manly, which is a tourism destination, has been hugely impacted by international tourism as well. So we need longer term planning to help the confidence for these businesses. Treasurer, are you able to support us or give an answer on that?
Well, in the budget, which was in May, we put in place a series of COVID-related economic support, which was designed to assist transition away from JobKeeper. You may remember people thought the sky was going to fall in when JobKeeper ended, and we held firm. It was costing us more than $2 billion a month, and the unemployment rate fell, and the economy found its equilibrium. What we sought to do, though, was to provide other economic support. Some of it was targeted, for example, in the aviation and the tourism industry with the half-price airfares, for example, to enable business. To enable more tourism traffic. Other things were we provided cheap and longer term loans. We provided direct support to the arts sector and the hospitality sector that were impacted. We had a whole series of initiatives as well as macroeconomic supports which were designed to boost economic activity. But there's no replacement for an easing of restrictions. Right now, you are in lockdown and you're receiving emergency support in the form of a non-assessable for tax purposes, $750 payment per week for a worker's lost 20 hours or more. And the combination of federal and state support into New South Wales is over $1.5 billion a week. Now, that can't go on indefinitely. That will go on over the course of this lockdown. And then your restrictions will start to ease. And then as more people get vaccinated and lockdowns, not brought in as regularly as we've seen, then our economy will start to open up. And places like the Northern Beaches will get back to a normal, COVID-safe way where economic activity will definitely be on the rise. So the best thing I can do, the best thing Andrew can do, the best thing state governments can do is to get on top of this virus, curb these outbreaks, stay strong through this lockdown, provide you with that emergency support. And then once we get out of this, get a gradual easing of restrictions, and that economic activity will come back.
Okay, thank you, Treasurer. I think I understand your point. I think the businesses are hurting now; they're hurting today, and I think we're looking a little bit long term to be thinking of vaccination right at the moment being the result to help these people with money in the bank. So, but I know I'm taking up more time than I should. I'll hand back to Tamara.
Thanks, Charlotte. Many of the businesses actually fall outside of the criteria required to apply for grants online. And I know that, for example, there's new businesses that have commenced operations since 2019. They have no comparable dates to prove their 30% decline in revenue. Businesses with a material change in circumstances, like opening a new store since 2019, businesses that have changed entities. So there's there's actually a lot of businesses that can't just go on, so they require manual assessment, and the government has said they're going to be very flexible and enable manual assessment, but the process of having your situation assessed manually is quite difficult to get through to Service New South Wales. So a lot of these businesses are at the moment sitting there under extreme cash flow pressure, unable to get through to Service New South Wales. Their accountants don't have clear guidelines on what is the manual assessment, what is the alternate way to be assessed, so they are of no use. So my question is, can the government provide more options, cover more situations in the online scenarios so that far less of these businesses have to go and be manually assessed?
Look, it's a very valid point, and I think Andrew should take the individual cases offline, because I know there's a willingness to try to provide that support to affected businesses. And I know when we did JobKeeper, even though we had reference periods, we had flexibility around those reference periods based on newly started businesses, or, as you say, businesses that may have acquired other businesses and therefore changed and the like. So there needs to be a degree of flexibility there, but with respect to the technical approach of online applications and the like versus manual, I think we'll take that offline with Andrew.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we can pick up with you, James, as well, and it is something we can raise with Dominello, I would have thought, through his stewardship of Service New South Wales. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we had the Executive Director of Service New South Wales on a Q&A earlier today, and the figures that she outlined in terms of requests were upwards of 20,000 businesses applying for grants in a short window of time. That has frankly overloaded the system, and what they had agreed, though, that there is a great deal of flexibility in the instance, the two that were just stated, if short trading window or it had changed hands, there would be a manual override to get that funds in bank accounts. The challenge is simply a bottleneck in getting through at the moment, and Service New South Wales have been very transparent about that, are bringing on more staff and working as hard as they can to get through that, and that'll be dealt with soon.
But I think like the bottom line is that we will work through your list that the chambers give us, so that people aren't fobbed off. I think we can work together quite effectively on that. Okay, Charlotte.
Thank you for that. That was definitely something that we wanted to cover off, because the issue is the time it's taking. I mean, 5 weeks now we've been in this situation, and as I said, we had it earlier this year after the Northern Beaches lockdown. Service New South Wales, it was amazing to have Bridget turn up today to our Zoom. However, there are businesses that are struggling. It's impacting mental health, and it's a broad scope. So I don't know whether, if they have 5,000 calls on a weekend that they're getting at the moment that are for callbacks, I don't know how, Senator Bragg, you're going to be able to manage that. But we need some action here, and this is something where I think there's an opportunity for federal, state and council to be working together, collaborating as well as you have, and continuing to do so to see if we can get revenue into people's accounts as quickly as possible. There is a long-term impact here, which is seriously concerning. To my next question, which was actually the fact that business is cyclical. So one of the reasons that there are so many manual assessments being requested is some businesses have periods where they're asked to compare two different periods. One of the periods may be, for tourism's sake, a rainy week, so their revenue might not be as high. So there are so many different reasons that people have to get a manual assessment, and I think that's a massive issue. Is the ATO handled it so well with JobKeeper last year? Treasurer, is there further support that could be given to help turn over this money faster? We know it's there, so how can we get it more quickly into our small business owners' bank accounts?
Well, Services Australia is delivering this particular payment program, and that's the arrangement that we reached. And as I understand it, that has progressed. They developed the systems. They've got a they're pretty good at what they do, but this is obviously, a significant scaled up project. So let's wait and see how it goes from here. But as I understand it, they've thrown a lot of resource at doing this and getting it delivered. It's obviously it's not JobKeeper, but the payment's the same rate as JobKeeper. This is actually a broader remit of eligible individuals in some respects, because, for example, casuals are eligible for these payments, and only permanent, long-term casuals were eligible for the JobKeeper payment. So, and as you know, through JobKeeper, the money was paid to the employer, and therefore through the employer to the employee, whereas this money is being paid directly to the employee and being done pretty quickly. So we think this is fit for purpose. As I said, the money's moving quickly on Services Australia side. In terms of the business payments, I understand Services New South Wales has made good progress. So let's just wait and see.
Okay, thank you. Well, they're struggling. I'm not sure what we're waiting to see what happens next, but
well, no, the money, as I understand it, money is already flowed, Charlotte. So there's more money to flow. When I say wait and see, money's going, and so but as more applications are processed, more money will be processed as well. But happy for James to take that offline and come back to you. But as I understand it, Services New South Wales is doing it as quickly as they can.
thank you, Treasurer.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's severe cash flow issues with a lot of our businesses, given the ones that aren't able to access rent relief have not as yet received money through Services New South Wales. I know Services Australia anecdotally has been quite quick in their payments to individuals, but Services New South Wales is obviously completely inundated, and those payments coming through to businesses, particularly if you fall outside of the online guidelines, are taking quite a while. So my question is, with payments to the ATO, I know there's opportunities to defer some payments, but like payroll tax, but all that really is doing is pushing the cash flow issue a little bit further into the future. I think you can defer it till October. We've got the June BAS is coming up for payment in late August. Is there an opportunity to waive rather than defer some of these payments, like PAYG? That was waiving that was a saviour in last year's lockdown. Is there an opportunity to waive that, the June BAS and GST, just to really help with these the severe cash flow issues that businesses?
Well, no, we've made our initiatives pretty clear what we're doing on income support and business support. On individual tax circumstances, those matters can be worked through with the tax office, and happy offline for Andrew to process some of those. But we're not looking at wide-scale waiving of tax obligations. Obviously, every case is different, and then that's why they should contact the tax office.
I should now, I did promise I would keep to time because the Treasurer has another engagement to go to. So I did just want to, before we wrap up, remind people that we will take any other questions that you have through my office, and we will get you responses. And I will work collaboratively with James to deal with some of the issues we've discussed tonight. So, Treasurer, really wanted to thank you for your time tonight. One of the great honours I have is to serve alongside you. You're a great leader. I think you've responded really strongly when the Australian people have needed you to do so. And we really appreciate you giving the time tonight that you have to the Northern Beaches and North Shore. I'm keen to get back there and have a beer and support some of these businesses once we get back open. So, and a very big thanks to Tamara and Charlotte from the Mosman and Manly Chambers for all the advocacy you're doing, representing your members so well. And thank you, of course, to James Griffin, who does a great job in State Parliament. So thank you, Treasurer, and thank you everyone for being here tonight.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, James, and particularly Charlotte, Tamara. And I know there will be lots of individual cases that can be followed up from this call. But I just want everyone to remember two things. First, there's an enormous amount of economic support that is being put to work in New South Wales. It cannot take everyone back to where they were, right? It cannot replace every lost dollar, but there's a very significant economic support that is coming, and none of our policies are set and forget. The second thing to say is, based on what I've seen with the long lockdown in Victoria, and also how the economy at a more broader level has responded following lockdowns, it does bounce back, and it does bounce back strongly. And so while right now that may seem little comfort to businesses that don't have people coming through their doors, or the bills are stacking up, when we get through this, and when you do come out of lockdown, the economy will recover. And all the advice to me is that the economy can recover fast. So I just want people to have, despite the difficulties, that element of hope and confidence going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.